A disaster in the sky, a disaster at sea, and just what the heck was that supposed to be anyway?
Those are the headlines this very week, decades past on Rochester's first TV station. Here's News 8 Now's Dave McKinley with News 8 Then.
10 years ago this week, tragedy off the coast of Long Island when TWA Flight 800 en route from New York to Paris plunged into the Atlantic, killing all 230 on board. Now, it always seems whenever there's a disaster of this magnitude, we're quick to go searching for some local connection. We didn't need to look far, as the pilot of the doomed flight was Churchville native Steve Snyder. 4 years later, and after what was billed as the most exhaustive and extensive probe in aviation history, the government concluded the cause was accidental, that a spark ignited a fuel tank, but to this day theories abound that it was either an act of terrorism or friendly fire from Navy ships training nearby. This week in 1996, 20 years ago this week. Well, so much for that version of the driving park bridge, which had served for several decades before it was replaced by the current incarnation of that span. As gas prices hit a 13-year low of 81 cents a gallon, inmates at Auburn Prison were busier than ever, producing the state's new Liberty license plates. And about 10 months after they discovered the precise location of its watery grave, explorers released the first televised pictures of the wreck of the Titanic this week in 1986. 30 years ago this week, when Terry Deal still represented the region's brightest hope on the PGA Tour, the port of Rochester was still a pretty scary place to visit, and Tony Leonardo was an up-and-coming lawyer, not a convicted felon serving time for drug and murder conspiracies. We shopped at bygone stores like Ormond, Waterbed World, and Star Market. But then, just like now, when plying the waters of the Erie Canal, it was always a good idea to wait for them to lift the bridge in Fairport before trying to pass beneath it, which these folks failed to do this week in 1976. 40 years ago this week, plans were completed for Rochester's newest cultural attraction. Perhaps if you look closely at its unique design, it won't be hard to answer this week's pop quiz, which is, do you know what this is? As it appeared only in drawings, but not in structural form, this week in 1966, back in the days of News 8 Then.
I think I might.
Me too.
Have to find out.
We'll commiserate. Proud to say I did get this one.
You were right.
Yeah. And here's the answer to the pop quiz.
By its unusual shape, you might well have recognized this as the blueprint for the Strassenberg Planetarium. Design work for the planetarium was completed 40 years ago this week. It would open 2 years later in 1968. Good for you, Marie.
And if you haven't been, you got to go.